There is a word that has been following you for a long time. Maybe it was said directly to your face. Maybe it was whispered behind your back. Or maybe you learned to say it to yourself before anyone else could. Delusional, too intense, not grounded enough. You have felt the subtle, constant pressure to tone it down, to be more realistic, to lower your expectations, to explain why you believe in a future that no one else can see yet. And for years, you've been told that if you don't have proof, you're supposed to wait. You're supposed to be patient, careful, and sensible. But what they never tell you is that realistic is often just a code word for being aligned with what already exists. To be realistic is to agree with the status quo. To be realistic is to stay within the borders of what everyone else has already approved. If you feel different, if you sense a path that hasn't been validated yet, you are quietly marked as unstable. But the truth is, every meaningful change in human history began as a kind of delusion. It began as a refusal to accept the current limits as final. And today, we are going to look at why that nothingness you feel is actually the weight of a future that hasn't caught up to you yet. The world teaches you to distrust your inner signals because reality, as we know it, is conservative. It protects what is already known. It trusts patterns that have proven themselves before, and it fears anything that arrives without credentials. So when you carry a belief that doesn't fit the shared agreement of reality, you create friction. People get uncomfortable, not because you are wrong, but because you are early. And being early looks identical to being wrong until the moment it doesn't. You have probably noticed how quickly people try to ground you. They offer advice under the mask of concern. They tell you to be practical. But what they are really doing is trying to stabilize their own uncertainty. Your conviction reminds them of the part of themselves they abandoned, the part that once moved towards something without a guarantee. When you stop looking for their permission to believe, you disrupt the invisible social contract that keeps everyone else safe. You aren't losing touch with reality. You are refusing to be confined by it. This path creates a lethal internal split. Outwardly, you learn to speak the language of caution just to survive. You add disclaimers to your dreams. You say maybe, and I don't know, even when your chest feels clear and certain. But inwardly, you are living on a different timeline. This split is exhausting. It creates a specific kind of doubt, not because your vision is weak, but because you are carrying it alone. Humans are social mirrors, and when no one reflects back what you see, your mind naturally starts to question its own sanity. Am I insightful, or am I just fooling myself? This doubt isn't a sign of failure. It's the psychological cost of independence. Most people resolve this tension by shrinking their inner world. They trade their vision for comfort. They choose belonging over becoming. And the world applauds them for growing up. But you didn't do that. You chose to stay in the tension. You chose the weight of being misunderstood over the hollowness of being accepted for a version of yourself that isn't real. Something begins to shift when you stop trying to defend the belief and start inhabiting it. At first, your belief felt like something fragile that you had to guard. But as you stop asking for permission, it becomes your center of gravity. You notice that you're less reactive to opinions. You stop trying to convince people. You realize that you don't need the world to hurry up and confirm what you already feel. This is the transition from fantasy to authorship. Authorship is quiet. It doesn't argue. It doesn't prove itself. It simply aligns. You begin making choices that fit your internal direction without announcing why. You choose environments that support your growth, and you allow certain relationships to fade without forcing closure. You are no longer a negotiator. You are a witness to your own becoming. You have learned that being seen incorrectly is not the same as being erased. Your nervous system is finally learning that misunderstanding is survivable. You are no longer chasing certainty. You are inhabiting direction, and direction does not need to be justified. It only needs to be lived. The word delusional may still surface, but it lands differently now. It glances off you because you recognize it as a reflection of someone else's limits, not a diagnosis of your own mind. You have realized that sanity is not defined by how well you conform to what exists, but by your capacity to stay coherent while moving toward what doesn't exist yet. You have carried something fragile for a long time without dropping it. You have stayed with a belief long enough for it to mature. You have tolerated the loneliness of being early. And that is not a flaw, it is a rare form of psychological sovereignty. You don't need to glorify it, you just need to recognize it. Before you move on, I want you to make one final internal shift. Comment below with the phrase, "I trust the vision." Let it be a public affirmation that you are done outsourcing your reality to people who are too afraid to dream. You are no longer waiting for proof. You are the proof. The tension is over. The authorship has begun. When people call something delusional, they usually aren't talking about your mental stability. They are talking about their own discomfort. They are reacting to something that doesn't align with what they already accept as possible. Something that refuses to stay inside the borders of what feels safe and familiar. Most people don't realize this, but reality, as it's commonly understood, is conservative. It protects what already exists. It trusts patterns that have proven themselves before, and it instinctively distrusts anything that arrives without credentials. So when you believe in something that hasn't happened yet, you create friction. Not because you're wrong, but because you're early. And being early looks exactly like being unrealistic when viewed from the present moment. You have felt this friction before. That subtle, heavy pause when you speak about where you are going, the polite nods, the careful, pitying smiles, the unspoken tension that says, "That's nice, but let's be sensible." In that moment, you feel a massive psychological pressure to adjust. You feel the urge to soften your certainty, to add disclaimers, to say you're just exploring or hoping. You do this not because you doubt yourself, but because you've learned how quickly confidence without proof unsettles people. What you are actually learning is that belief without permission is threatening. It reminds people of the part of themselves they abandoned, the part that once trusted inner signals before the world approved them. So they respond by trying to ground you. They advise you. They warn you. They do it under the mask of concern, but their logic is a slow erasure of your potential. Your belief didn't come from a fantasy. It came from a recognition, a deep, internal sense of alignment that didn't need external validation to exist. That kind of knowing is dangerous to those who no longer trust anything that isn't immediately verifiable. You begin to feel split. Outwardly, you learn to sound practical and speak the language of caution, but inwardly, you are living from a different timeline. This split is exhausting, and it creates a doubt that cuts deeper than any insult. You start to ask yourself, am I being insightful, or am I fooling myself? This question doesn't come from a lack of intelligence. It comes from integrity. You genuinely care about not lying to yourself. But here is the truth most people never hear. Belief that precedes evidence is not denial. It's orientation. It's your nervous system aligning toward a future state before the environment has shifted to support it. This is how change actually happens. It happens internally first, in isolation, without consensus, and without applause. From the outside, it looks unstable. From the inside, it is a survival requirement. The gap between your inner certainty and the outer contradiction is where most people break, but it is also where the superpower is forged. In the next part, we will look at the social contract of realism and why your refusal to settle is the only thing keeping your identity from becoming hollow. There is a moment that comes after your belief has survived doubt for long enough. It stops feeling fragile. It stops asking for reassurance. And instead, it starts quietly reshaping how you move through the world. You carry it in your posture, in your pauses, and in your refusal to negotiate your reality with the group. This is the part most people don't realize. When you stop explaining your vision, you don't just remove words, you remove access. And most people don't realize how much of their sense of stability comes from having access to you. They rely on your reasons, your logic, and your realistic explanations to feel safe in your presence. When you withdraw that map, you trigger something primitive in them. Without your narrative to guide them, people feel like they are walking without coordinates. And uncertainty makes the human mind behave strangely. They will attempt to define you. They will assign labels to your silence and stories to your boundaries, not because they want to know you better, but because they want to regain orientation. This is where the word delusional becomes a weapon. It isn't a diagnosis, it's a tool for reclamation. By calling you unrealistic, they are attempting to pull you back into the collective agreement of what is possible. They want to finalize you into a neat, manageable conclusion so they don't have to face the vacuum of your potential. But what they are truly reacting to is your shift toward internal authority. Most people function on a system of external consensus. They only believe what everyone else agrees is real. When you step outside that contract, you disrupt the unspoken hierarchy. You are no longer asking to be understood. You are allowing yourself to be perceived. This is a massive psychological shift. One seeks approval, the other accepts ambiguity. And humans hate ambiguity. They will push you, test you, and ask questions designed to trigger your old habit of over-clarification. They want the relief that your reasonableness used to provide. This is the psychological access trap. If you collapse into explanation, you give them back the remote control to your identity. But if you hold the silence, you force them to regulate themselves. You are teaching them that your internal world is not a democracy. It is a sovereign state. This independence is not loud or glamorous. It is heavy and often lonely. It requires you to trust internal signals even when no one is mirroring them back to you. You are moving from being a person who reacts to the world to a person who is beginning to shape it. But as you step deeper into this sovereignty, you will encounter the most dangerous role you've ever played. In the next part, we will look at the erosion of the practical mind, why your obsession with being sensible was actually a slow death, and how to finally break the mirror of other people's expectations. You have spent your whole life trying to be the sensible one, the one who makes sense, the one who doesn't cause trouble, the one who stays grounded. But look closely at that grounding. It wasn't a foundation, it was an anchor. It was a cage designed to keep you from drifting into a territory that others couldn't control. Being practical was simply the price you paid for belonging. You were praised for your maturity and your realism, but every time you accepted those labels, you were performing a quiet act of self-betrayal. You were trimming your vision to fit the size of the room you were in, and eventually, you started to mistake the walls of that room for the limits of the world. This is the erosion of the practical mind. When you finally decide to stop being sensible, you aren't just changing your mind. You are killing a version of yourself that everyone else found useful. And that version won't go quietly. You will feel a deep, visceral guilt, as if you are failing some moral test. You'll think you're becoming irresponsible or that you're losing your grip on reality. But that guilt isn't coming from your integrity. It's coming from your conditioning. It's the sound of the social contract being torn up. You were never meant to be a map for people who aren't going where you're going. The shift from being reasonable to being real is the loneliest transition you will ever make. Because being reasonable was the character that gave you safety. Without that mask, you are standing in the world as a stranger to the expectations of others. You are no longer performing a coherence that doesn't exist. You are allowing yourself to be jagged, unpolished, and intensely certain about things you cannot prove. This is where the true power of your so-called delusion begins to manifest. It is no longer an idea you are defending. It is an identity you are inhabiting. You have moved from thinking about a future to occupying it. Most people never make it past this stage. They feel the cold air of independence and they rush back to the warmth of consensus. They would rather be wrong with the group than be right alone. But you've already stayed in the tension too long to go back. You've realized that the danger isn't that your belief makes you blind. The danger is that abandoning it makes you hollow. You have felt that hollowness before. In every moment, you followed advice that made sense but didn't feel right. You have decided that the disorientation of self-betrayal is worse than the isolation of truth. You are no longer asking for permission to be the person you already are. You have stopped being a negotiator and started being an author. In the final stretch, we're going to look at the ultimate arrival, the moment where your vision stops being a dream and starts being the only reality that has the power to change anything. The struggle you've been carrying has finally begun to soften, not because you've reached the destination, but because the belief is no longer something you are dragging against resistance. It has started to carry you. You notice it in the way you respond to uncertainty now. There is less panic in the not knowing and less urgency to arrive. You have finally understood that clarity doesn't always come first. Sometimes, clarity is a reward that follows commitment. The word delusional no longer haunts you because it has been stripped of its power. When it appears now, you recognize it for what it truly is, a signal that you are standing at the edge of what is familiar, not outside of what is sane. You are no longer waiting for the world to validate your move before you make it. Your actions have become quieter, more deliberate, and less reactive. You don't feel the need to announce what you are becoming because you are too busy allowing it to shape your choices. There is a calm that comes from this, not the high of a triumph, but the steady, heavy peace of knowing you are no longer betraying yourself. You are no longer fragmented. The internal negotiation has ended. You have stopped trying to adjust your inner truth to fit the narrow expectations of a world that values comfort over growth. This alignment changes everything. You stop rushing because you understand that real growth doesn't follow a social timeline. You stop needing everyone to understand you because you recognize that true connection doesn't require consensus. And most importantly, you stop interrogating every instinct. You trust yourself, not blindly, but deeply. You have accepted the cost of this independence. You allow people to misinterpret your path. You allow them to call it a fantasy. You allow them to quietly disengage. You understand now that everyone chooses the level of uncertainty they can tolerate, and you have simply chosen to tolerate more. What you once feared was a delusion was actually a profound devotion. It was a devotion to a future you felt before you could see it. It was a loyalty to an internal coherence that mattered more than external agreement. This didn't make you detached from reality. It made you the author of a new one. You aren't chasing certainty anymore. You are inhabiting a direction. And that direction doesn't need to be justified. It only needs to be lived. You have stayed with a fragile belief long enough for it to mature into a grounded presence. You have tolerated being early until the world began to catch up. If you have stayed through this entire journey, it is because you are done being realistic at the expense of being alive. To seal this shift, I want you to perform one final act of internal authority. Comment below with the phrase, "I trust the vision." By typing these words, you are reclaiming your capacity to become. You are telling your nervous system that the era of seeking permission is over. You are staying with your truth, staying with the uncertainty, and walking forward without a map that others recognize. You are not lost. You are just early. And being early is the only way to arrive at a future that others haven't even imagined yet. Stay quiet. Stay patient. Stay honest. The authorship has already begun.